Dr. An is a professor of geography at San Diego State University, California. Dr. An is a fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Sciences, and he's just been elected into the fellow of American Association of Geographers. Congratulations, Dr. An. And so he will be speaking on leveraging concurrent green efforts in the pandemic shadowed world. Take it away, Professor An.
All right. Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Li, Professor of Geography at San Diego State. Today, I will talk about leveraging concurrent green efforts in the pandemic shadowed world. I would like to thank my co-authors, and some of them are actually here today, like Dr. Jack Liu, Dr. Konghei Shang, and maybe a few others. Well, first, what is green? When green is used as a verb, it means to make the landscape, the environment more sustainable and more resilient. Accordingly, green efforts are whatever programs, payments, initiatives that intend to make the environment green or more sustainable. Here are a few examples of green efforts, such as United Nations Green Climate Fund, European Union's Green Deal, and others. According to a paper that Dr. Jack Liu published, and I was a co-author 20 years ago in the Ornong Nature Reserve, this is a protected area, the green area for the panda habitats. So even after the establishment of the panda reserve in 1975, there was a decline in the panda habitat and fragmentation in the panda habitat. What this story tells us, green efforts are not necessarily make the environment green. So in this story, in this presentation, I'm going to begin with big questions. So inspired by Hermogenes, the Greek philosopher, I intend to answer the seven W questions. Who should be involved in all the green efforts? When, where, and why such green efforts should be made? And in what way and by what means the environment should be designed or re-engineered? To answer these questions, we promote a framework that addresses these questions from local to global scales, and also using a hybrid of data science and theory informed approaches. Of course, the goal is to engineer or to design or to change the environment for better sustainability, resilience, and equity. Well, as examples, we explored two biggest green efforts in China. One is the Green to Green program that makes payments to eligible landholders so that they convert a portion or part of their cropland, usually or pasture, to forest land or grassland. The major goal is to reduce the surface runoff and soil erosion. Essentially, it is a farmland or pasture retirement program. The second one is called Green Efforts in China's Fourth Ecological Benefit Compensation Program, or FEBC program, which pays stakeholders for a strict logging ban to conserve selected natural forest lands. The first one, GTGP, is the same as CCFP in Konghei's presentation, just different names. Well, my collaborators and I started a green effort project from a local scale almost 40 years ago in Fanjunshan National Nature Reserve. This reserve is credited to be an ecosystem kingdom for its over 6,000 plant, animal, and insect species. Many of them are endemic. In addition, the reserve landscape is the only and the last habitat of the golden monkey, of the golden monkeys here. And also they are household in the reserve. All these white squares are the households. Well, first, to answer these questions, we want to first answer the 7W questions about who, what, when, where, why, in what way, and by what means. We took samples, we interviewed local households, and also we obtained reliable data about local people, what they think, what they perceive, and how they live. We also want to know the animals, where and when they occur, at what environment conditions. We collected camera trapping data, and we process data and also build various models to analyze the behavior patterns of the animals. To know the landscape, we collected Landsat and other satellite imagery in these 3 years, 1996, 2011, 2016. After we did a bunch of calibration, correction, rectifications, and also based on ground reference data, we were able to document the environment as well as the changes on the environment. Well, so here I want to just focus on one accidental finding based on the data from 2014. We found a positive correlation between the areas enrolled in FEBC1, grant effort, and the other is area enrolled in GTGP or CCFP in his presentation. We found a small to moderate correlation, even though the coefficient is not big, but it's significant. Sometimes we just overlook it. But I decided next year to take students to the landscape, the Fanjin National Reserve, again, and collect more data. This time we found more solid evidence for the interactions between the two grant efforts in places with both programs. The enrollments in GTGP would go up by 9%, simply because there is FEBC payment in the surrounding or in the same area. So, however, I'm still not convinced about this finding is site-specific or not. Well, very lucky I came to know Dr. Kong-Hei Song and his team at Tianma Nature Reserve, another nature reserve in China, in Anhui province. Through extensive conversations and data analysis, also thanks Dr. Qi Zhang for his very smart data analysis, we found similar results also came up in the Anhui, in this Anhui Nature Reserve. In places with both programs, the enrollment in GTGP would go up by 10%, a little bit higher than that in FNR, simply because the concurrent PS program, in this case, FEBC program. Well, so here we further look into the implications of this finding by extrapolating this finding to the whole country of China. What we found is if there's no free riders exist, the actual GTGP enrollment is approximately 0.46 million hectares of more GTGP land, which is equivalent to approximately 1.4 billion ton of carbon sequestration per year. So this is the byproduct or the co-benefit of this concurrent program, grant effort. Next, I want to talk about some of the potential applications of this finding for landscape engineering. A circle, in this case, a circle is an effort spent on a certain area. The blue area is only eligible for GTGP, and the one in the middle, this area is then eligible for both programs, and the one on the right with a white boundary is an area eligible only for FEBC program. Because of the spillover effects, an actual amount of GTGP enrollment may come out as discussed earlier. This may be good news because if all other conditions are met, we should invest more grant efforts in the one in the middle. In this case, we can increase the enrollment in GTGP. But our data show that in many instances, some local household, local people may be free riders. They enroll more of their free land or actual land in GTGP for more money, but fail to carry out their obligations. So we suggest that policymakers may change the enrollment policy or rules a little bit so that some FEBC efforts can be reallocated to FEBC areas only. So this is a reallocation. As a result, this portion disappears. But as a result, the actual GTGP enrollment is gone, but this avoids payments with zero or very little ecological benefits. The other benefit is this. Through such a reshuffle of grant efforts, we are able to allow approximately 3% of budget cut, which means we decrease the budget, but still we can maintain the same total area for both GDP and FEBC. This is very important in times of crisis, such as the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, how about this situation in the US? We then look into the grant efforts in the US. The first is the Conservation Reserve Program, CRP, which retires environmentally sensitive farmland. Usually they are mostly in highly erodible places from agricultural production for about 10 to 15 years. So CRP is the first. The second one is the Environment Quality Incentives Program, EQIP, which pay eligible farmers so that they adopt environmentally friendly practice on working farmland. So this one is not for retirement. It's just for practice more environmentally friendly. Well, unfortunately, there is a disappointing trend for the CRP. Ever since 2008, there is a almost linear decline for the enrollment area. What is the reason for that? Inspired by the spillover effects we found in China, we want to know whether such effects exist between CRP and EQIP in the US. So our hypothesis is there might be also spillover or interactive effects between these two programs. Given empirical evidence, we found also the fact that CRP was launched much earlier. We assume that EQIP might at least partially account for the declining trend that I just showed you. We collect data for over 3,100 or over 3,000 counties in the US from the USDA, and also we perform regression analysis to explore how, in this case, X1 is EQIP and Y is CRP enrollment. And its B1 coefficient is the effect of EQIP on CRP. Here, I want to mention an inconvenient truth. Well, this is the title of a book by Elgol. If there's no spillover effect, this is how the grant efforts are invested. However, our data analysis found that in areas with both CRP, the one in the middle, and EQIP, a certain amount of land, actually 22%, which is best for CRP, has switched to EQIP because EQIP has a much higher pay rates. And at the same time, the farmers don't have to retire them. They can still get agricultural incomes. As a result, we lost some ecological benefit because this land is best for CRP, but just because of the economic incentive, it has been switched from here to here. Of course, in this case, the total area of CRP and EQIP has not been changed, but the government or whatever agency has to pay more because of higher pay rate of EQIP. Well, what is the application of this finding for landscape design and engineering? As we did in the Chinese case, we suggest changing the enrollment policy or rule a little bit, such that some of the EQIP efforts in the middle section can be reallocated to the one on the right-hand side for EQIP. As a result, the total area of CRP and EQIP enrollment remains unchanged, as in the Chinese case. But we get, less in expenditure because in this case, and also higher ecological benefits. As a result, this allows for actually, this is, it's a typo, it's not 3%, it's 5% of the budget cut, but we still keep the summation of the CRP and EQIP unchanged. This is critically important in an area with budget cut because of crises such as COVID-19 and pandemic. Well, given this wonderful, interesting results, what about the other parts of the world? Is this only country specific? We then searched a large number of online databases, online archives, and looked into evidence of such effects in many other places. So for example, we have data from Australia, Southern Africa, and so on and so forth. what we found is, well, a green efforts usually by reviewing this paper has three components: the policy, intended behavior, intended gain. People usually study these three elements within the same program. This is program one, program two, okay? Seldom have we looked at interactions, figured out how one behavior here may affect the other behavior, or how one behavior may affect, in this case, the gain on the other program, or you can do the vice versa. How one behavior may affect the gain here, or how one policy may affect the behavior in here. This is not very much done. So of course, concurrent grant efforts, first, programs are invested on the same parcel or on the same recipient. Well, what we found based on all the previous case studies, literature review is that there is cross-element spillover effect. One behavior may affect the behavior of the other program or the other grant effort, and behavior intended or expected from one program may actually affect the gain of the other. And in the same way, the policy and policy may have interactions, gain and gain may have interactions. And also all these dashed arrows, which represent spillover effects, may change over time. At one time, it's significant, maybe over time, it's insignificant or even change the directions. Well, in summary, spillover effects among grant efforts appear to be prevalent across the whole world. Surprisingly, such spillover effects have been largely ignored, despite many calls for exploring such effects, such as helicoptering, Dr. New just raised. As a consequence, there is very little or even, if not level, coordination among many concurrent grant efforts, leading to investment redundancies, wastes, and many unknown consequences. What we recommend here is we explore such spillover effects, change eligibility policy or rules or other policies. We reallocate grant efforts such that with the same money, we conserve more environment, or with the same conservation area, we spend less money. So anyway, with consideration of all such spillover effects, we turn to these 7 big questions again about the environment to conserve, to achieve higher sustainability, resilience, and equity. Okay, so thank you. I'm ready to have take some questions. Oops.
Great, Dr. An, for a wonderful presentation. Questions? I haven't seen one on the chat or the QA section yet. So this is a very timely study, and we all know that at this moment, scientists or world leaders in Glasgow are committing to stop deforestation by 2030. So this policy effect can help achieve the goal. Can you comment on that?
Oh, yes. Well, right now, today we have talked about sustainability, environmental degradation, and so on and so forth. But on the other hand, the challenge is almost every country has a budget limit. But we want to spend every dollar, every effort in a very efficient way. I think our study tries to say we want to remove or at least minimize the redundancies. In some instance, figure in the Chinese case, the government pays money, but some households, they enroll some of the land, but they spend little time to do their responsibilities. So in this case, it's better to reallocate some of the investment to some more, fragile, more vulnerable places. In that situation, I would like to say the government may still spend the same amount of money, but we enlarge, the conservation benefits. In this case, which is great for this, the Glasgow, summit, the goal to conserve, to save the environment, to combat climate change, combat sea level rise, to combat all the other negative consequences that this planet is facing.
Okay. All right, great, thank you. We have just a question here from Professor Seals. I'm interested in the mechanism for spillover effects. Does implementation of one policy affect participation in another policy? Or does the outcome caused by one policy affect participation in another policy or something else?
Exactly. Thank you, Dr. Sales, for this wonderful question. This is the essence of our research and actually our findings. We found is one program and the other, they cross affect each other. Some, for example, like what you said, implementation for one policy, may have some unintended, consequence or impact on the participation of another. And in the same way, the participation of another policy may actually have some unintended, impact or influence on the gains or the expected outcomes of the first of the other, program. So, given what we have found in here, we would recommend that it becomes a, systematic exploration in terms of, when we plan, implement, or evaluate, the grant efforts or environment conservation programs, we do think about this spillover effects. This actually gets back to Dr. Jack New's technical coupling. In our study, there are many situations, the places are quite far away with each other, but we do find a strong evidence for the spillover effect. This actually supports what Dr. Jack New has just presented.
Great, thank you.